It's a situation that most of us never expect to face, being stopped by the police and having to deal with boundaries being crossed. But what happens when the ones meant to protect us blur those lines? In today's story, we're diving into a shocking encounter where female cops, who are supposed to uphold the law, overstep their authority in a way that no one saw coming. This isn't just about a routine traffic stop. It's about power, boundaries, and what happens when a badge is misused. As the story unfolds, you'll meet the key players: a civilian just trying to get through their day, and two officers who seem to forget where their duty ends and personal boundaries begin. What starts off as a simple exchange quickly escalates into a confrontation that leaves everyone questioning the intentions of the officers involved. But the real question is, how far is too far? When do you draw the line between enforcing the law and respecting personal space? By the end of this video, you'll be left wondering what happens next. Do the officers face consequences, or does this troubling encounter go unnoticed? Stay tuned for the shocking twists that are about to unfold. It's early afternoon when the incident begins. The civilian, a 30-year-old man, had been driving down a quiet suburban street, nothing out of the ordinary. He was just on his way home after a long day at work. He didn't think much of the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. Routine traffic stop, right? But as he pulled over, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. Two female officers approached his vehicle, their demeanor sharp and professional at first. The first officer, Officer Matthews, was in her mid-30s, known for being tough but fair. The second, Officer Clark, was a rookie, barely out of training, eager to prove herself. The tension was palpable as Officer Matthews asked for his license and registration, but the real shift came when she asked him to step out of the car. "Is there a reason I'm being pulled over?" he asked, still trying to understand what was happening. Officer Matthews didn't respond directly. Instead, she walked around his car, keeping her eyes on him, as if searching for something more. Meanwhile, Officer Clark stood a little too close, her presence intimidating rather than reassuring. The man felt trapped, his mind racing. Why were they being so aggressive? What were they really after? The man reluctantly stepped out of his car, his heart pounding in his chest. The quiet neighborhood suddenly felt suffocating, with every sound amplified: the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of passing cars. Officer Matthews gestured for him to move toward the sidewalk, her tone firm but vague, offering no real explanation for why he'd been stopped. "I still don't understand what's going on," he said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. Officer Clark remained silent, her eyes fixed on him, almost as if she were waiting for something. The man couldn't tell if it was her inexperience or something else that made her presence feel so unnerving. As Officer Matthews began questioning him, her words became more probing, veering into topics that didn't seem related to a traffic stop at all. She asked about his job, where he was coming from, and even his personal relationships. It felt invasive, unnecessary. When he politely refused to answer certain questions, her demeanor shifted. She pressed harder, her voice sharper, her body language more assertive. The man glanced around, wondering if anyone was watching, but the street remained eerily empty. He knew his rights. He didn't have to answer these questions. But with two officers in front of him, challenging their authority didn't feel like a safe option. The tension was building, and he couldn't help but wonder: was this really about a minor traffic violation? Or was there something else going on? The man stood on the sidewalk, his pulse quickening as Officer Matthews continued her line of questioning. It wasn't just the nature of the questions. It was the way she asked them, her tone carrying an air of suspicion that didn't seem justified. Meanwhile, Officer Clark appeared restless, her hand hovering near her belt, as though she expected something to happen. The unease in the air was almost tangible. When the man hesitated to answer another probing question, Officer Matthews stepped closer, her voice dropping lower, almost challenging. "Are you hiding something?" she asked, her words sharp enough to cut through the silence. The man took a deep breath, holding his ground. "I've done nothing wrong. I've given you my information. If there's a real reason for this stop, I'd like to know." That was when Officer Clark interjected for the first time. Her voice was shaky, her words hurried. "We need to search the car," she said, her eyes darting between the man and Officer Matthews. The man's heart sank. A search? For what? There had been no indication, no explanation, nothing to suggest this was anything more than a routine stop. The man refused politely but firmly, reminding them of his rights. Officer Matthews' jaw tightened, and the atmosphere shifted again, the tension now almost unbearable. What would happen next? Would they escalate, or would the truth behind their actions finally come to light? The man couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't just about the law, it was something much bigger. The silence that followed his refusal felt heavy, almost oppressive. Officer Matthews exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance with Officer Clark. It was clear they weren't backing down, and the man braced himself for what might come next. Matthews stepped forward, her tone now colder, her authority pressed harder. "If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't have an issue with this," she said, her words calculated, almost rehearsed. The man opened his mouth to respond when, suddenly, another voice broke the tension. "What's going on here?" A woman appeared from a nearby house, her phone in hand, recording the scene. She looked to be in her mid-40s, a neighbor perhaps, but her presence shifted the dynamic instantly. The officers stiffened, clearly aware of the camera now pointed at them. The man felt a flicker of relief, but it was short-lived. Officer Clark, visibly nervous, whispered something to Matthews. Whatever it was, it made Matthews' expression harden. "Step back," Matthews barked at the woman, but she didn't budge. Instead, the neighbor asked pointedly, "Why are you searching him?" "He lives down the street." "What's he done?" The man's mind raced. Did they really think he was a threat? Or was this encounter driven by something far more personal? The stakes had shifted, and with an audience now present, it was unclear whether things would escalate further, or if this confrontation was far from over. The tension reached its peak as the neighbor continued filming, her voice steady as she asked again, "What exactly is he being accused of?" Officer Matthews hesitated for the first time, her confidence faltering under the scrutiny. She glanced at Officer Clark, who was visibly struggling to maintain her composure. Then, just as it seemed things might de-escalate, Matthews surprised everyone by stating firmly, "We received a tip about a vehicle matching this description involved in suspicious activity." The man froze, the weight of her words sinking in. A tip. He couldn't help but wonder if this was a convenient excuse or something more deliberate. But before Matthews could proceed, Clark interrupted, her voice cracking. "This isn't right. We're supposed to confirm before." Matthews shot her a glare, cutting her off mid-sentence. The rookie's words hung in the air, and the man realized he wasn't the only one questioning the situation. In a final twist, the neighbor's phone buzzed loudly, and she quickly glanced at the screen. "You might want to stop now," she said, holding it up. Live streaming. Dozens of viewers were already commenting, questioning the officer's behavior. Matthew's face hardened, but she knew the damage was done. Under the weight of the live audience and Clark's hesitation, the officers retreated, abandoning their claim of a tip. The man, shaken but relieved, watched as they left. The neighbor lowered her phone and said quietly, "They've done this before. You're not the first." As he processed her words, one question lingered. how many others have faced this same abuse of power? And how many more would it take to bring real accountability? The street felt quieter now as the officer's car disappeared down the road. The man stood there for a moment, letting out a deep breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The neighbor turned to him, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. "You okay?" she asked, her phone still in hand, the live stream now paused. He nodded slowly, though the tension in his chest lingered. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I don't know how that would have ended without you stepping in." The woman gave a small smile. "It's not the first time I've seen something like this," she admitted. "But we can't let them think no one's watching." Later that evening, as the man replayed the events in his mind, he couldn't shake the neighbor's final words. Asterisk, you're not the first asterisk. It was a sobering thought, one that stuck with him as he filed a formal complaint. He knew it wasn't just about him. It was about making sure no one else had to go through the same experience. The story spread quickly, thanks to the live footage. It sparked conversations about accountability and the importance of knowing your rights. For the man, it was a lesson in resilience and a reminder of the power of standing up, even when it's uncomfortable.